Time is a relative factor. During this period, mankind slowly awakens out of its sleep of thousands of years to realize the great reality that the whole universe is alive with different spiritual and material dimensions. God would never have sown a field of flowers like our universe if only one flower, our Earth, would germinate. From the year 2011 on, prophecies predict the birth of a planetary consciousness. That is, that we will recognize ourselves in one another, that we are all different, but that we are one in spirit.
The Mayan calendar and the prophecies from the Maya is a very big topic. I first got interested in this after doing the research for Mass Dreams of the Future. And when I found that so many ancient prophecies from all around the world seem to converge on the time period that we are now entering into between the middle of the 1990s and the next 20-year period. The Mayans, I found, had a very specific calendar of a cycle of 5,200 years. And interestingly enough, this cycle goes all the way back to 3100 BC. And if you add that up to make 5,200, you find that it comes out to 2012, which isn't very far away. So that in fact, the Mayan prophecies about coming into some form of new age or some form of changing of the world seem to be headed right in the near future in the next 15 to 20 year period.
What are the prophecies of the Hopi Indians?
I was very privileged to be invited by one of the elders of the village of Hotevilla, which is probably the most traditional of the 13 Hopi villages in Arizona, to witness some of their prophecies and to see some of their stone petroglyphs that they have carved out in the desert for maybe as long as 2,000 years. Their prophecies are very long and complicated, but again they follow the Mayan example and point us to the next 20 years as a very important period in world history. One of their prophecies concerns 3 great catastrophes or crises of the 20th century. And we've already gone through 2 of these crises, and we've perhaps started on the 3rd one with what was commonly called the Gulf War, or the invasion of the American and British and other forces, the UN forces, into Iraq following the Iraqi takeover of Kuwait in 1991. So this to the Hopi was a very serious sign that we might start a general conflict between the people who follow the moon, that is to say the Islamic peoples, and the Western peoples of the world. They finally indicate that this conflict will become really catastrophic only if people whose color is red also somehow get involved, that there will be a color red involved. And I'm not sure that this will happen, but it is possible when you think the only people left in the world who really use red as their main color are the people of China, one of the biggest nations on the earth.
Then will follow 1,000 years of spiritual completion of mankind, the kingdom of peace of 1,000 years, when the masters of wisdom will appear. Until that time, not only will parts of mankind step back into the 4th and 5th dimensions, but also the cosmic fall of the Omega cycle will end. God's exhaling flows into the inhaling. The Alpha cycle commences. Everything returns to the source from which it originated. We are concluding the spiritual involution and the parallel evolution of the physical body. Our forefathers passed on this mystery in the shape of the Sphinx before they left this planet. The descending spirit of the sun, also called soul, embodied in the human beast, has experienced the crucifixion of the soul through reincarnation. After the death of the human beast, who symbolically represents the animal qualities of the human ego, man will be reborn in spirit through the completion of his ego. This crucifixion and resurrection will be experienced by many people during the following years of the apocalypse, until the planet in its entirety experiences the resurrection. After that, the marriage of heaven and earth follows. Before the alpha cycle begins, we have a non-time, when the source itself enters into us, reconnects with us, so that we are able to feel that we are a united being. The birth of the planetary Christ and the Buddhi consciousness. The return of the Christ, the return of the teachers of the worlds, the returning of the extraterrestrials, or heavenly master teachers, therefore all point towards this event. The planetary birth of the Christ consciousness, the neural webbing of mankind into a collective consciousness. However, until the conclusion of this quantum leap into the seventh dimension, the greatest changes will happen on Earth.
All great religions of today are familiar with the idea of a second coming. We Christians await the return of Jesus. The Apostle Lucas and Marcus write about it. He will be enthroned in the clouds. The Apocalypse is supposed to have been written by St. John, which is not true, because the essential passages are older than the Apostle John. In the Apocalypse we read about the signs and plagues that will come upon humanity. A star would fall from the sky, the moon would light up, and the heavens would roll up and unfold like a manuscript. Earthquakes and false prophets would come, and man would wander about not knowing what was happening. A group of men will finally survive the second coming of the gods, the so-called Final Judgment Day. But this is not only so in the Christian community. The Muslim community is also awaiting their Mahdi and the Jews their Messiah. Overall, this thought is much older. Let us go back to Babylon and Sumer, where we find the gods Baal and Baal, which are one and the same. In Old Egypt, we obviously find the sun god Ra. All these gods have promised to return in the far future, and since that time, the belief of a second coming is kept alive. I am absolutely convinced that none of these so-called Jesus or Mahdi or whatever we may call the Messiah will appear, but that it will be a space event. If somebody does appear, which is fine with me, then it will be extraterrestrials.
With the ascension of mankind into the higher dimension of consciousness and the return of the knowledge of Atlantis and Lemuria, the purified continents of Atlantis and Lemuria will also rise out of the oceans, because human consciousness is synchronized with the planetary consciousness. Humans who have decided to open up to the higher dimensions are beginning to feel a part of an ever-increasing learning process where life is the playground. On the other hand, humans who have subconsciously decided to remain in the third dimension with their consciousness will not feel any great changes within themselves. But we will all experience the big process of purification on a planetary level, because planet Earth is straightening its spine. That is, the axis of the poles is shifting again, and along with it the climatic zones at an extremely fast pace. The shifting of the poles has already begun. New cosmic energies will then flow through the spine of the Earth, that is the axis of the poles, and be distributed across the electromagnetic field of its aura.
A pole shift can have different effects. We cannot say for sure because we have never observed it on Earth. But the fact that Earth is a gigantic magnet indicates that if it shifts its poles, the inner Earth will be slightly unbalanced.
Kann es durchaus sein, dass das Erdinnere ein wenig durcheinander kommt.
It may lead to volcanic eruptions, landmass shifts, or earthquakes. And of course, tidal waves both enormous and small. Naturally, we must distinguish between the pole shift and the axis shift. Because Earth spins like a top, it is almost impossible that the axis would shift. In any case, we can't make a scientific statement about it. Theoretically, it would seem that an axis shift would be possible, but by whatever process, the Earth crust could shift, and for man on Earth this would have the same effect as an axis shift. On the basis of scientific research, we can say that many such pole shifts have happened during the last 80 million years. They have occurred in a variety of frequencies. The most pole shifts we have had in 1 million years were 4, but there were also 1 million years where we only had 1 pole shift. So the frequencies of the single pole shifts are subject to fluctuations.
Das ist also in großen Schwankungen unterworfen, die Frequenz der einzelnen Polflips.
The great flood in the Bible, which is known to practically all people, could be explained with a pole or axis shift, or a shift of the Earth's crust through which enormous waves of water, hundreds of meters high, could develop.
Bei dem es unter Umständen sehr große Wasserwellen und hunderte von Meter hohe Wogen geben kann.
My observations with this device go back over the last 10 years. During that time, the strength of the magnetic field has reduced by around 4 degrees.
4 Grad reduziert.
As the old prophecies have already predicted, the wheat will part from the chaff. Those people who can adapt to the faster flowing energy by extending their consciousness will survive the purification process. Those people, however, who desperately cling to the old reality will have difficulties adjusting their bodies to the faster frequency. Therefore, their process of aging will be accelerated. The great purification will divide mankind into 2 big groups. Those who will consciously want to recognize the Spirit in its entirety, and the others who will continue to believe only in the things visible and provable, and therefore will exclude themselves from the opening of higher dimensions of consciousness. Many prophets, such as those mentioned in the Apocalypse of the Bible and by Nostradamus, have predicted that within the next stage of transition from the 3rd dimension of consciousness into the 4th and 5th dimensions, large disasters will occur.
The Apostle John tells us in Revelation chapter 1 and verses 9, 10 and 11 that he was on the island of Patmos because of the Word of God, because of his faithfulness as a disciple of Jesus, because of his faithfulness as a prophet. When John focused upon the return of Jesus Christ the second time, he focused upon what we find in other places in the Bible about how Jesus will come and why he will come and what will happen when Jesus Christ comes. John in Revelation chapter 1 and verse 7 made it very clear that when Jesus Christ returns, every person who is alive on planet Earth at that time will witness that coming. Every person will see him come. If you go to the last verses in Revelation chapter 6, you have it very clearly stated that at the time of the coming of Jesus Christ there's going to be a massive earthquake. Every island will move out of its place. John uses the word saying that the heavens are going to roll back, as it were, and the glory of Jesus Christ and the Father is going to be revealed to people. Many people will be absolutely terrified by that event, and we read in Revelation chapter 6, in the midst of the earthquake and the sun going dark and the moon turning to blood and stars falling from heaven, you read of people who will be terrified and will be crying out to the rocks and the mountains, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits upon the throne and from the wrath or the judgment of the Lamb.